Hello everybody, welcome back to Universe Arcade's Trained to Well, today we're going to look at Stephen Berkoff's adaptation of the Metamorphosis. Let's jump right into it, shall we? So first off, the Metamorphosis was first written by Franz Kafka and published in 1915 and then adapted to the stage by Stephen Berkoff in 1969. It plays with the themes of the disconnect between mind and body, sympathy and its limit, alienation, transformation, family, and the patriarchy. If you don't know who Stephen Berkoff is, but who you probably should know if you're watching this video, I'll quickly go over some of his stylistic influences and what he tries to do in his play so you get a bit of an idea. Berkoff's style, described by Alex Sierras, who is a critic, is quite in-your-face theatre. It's the kind of theatre that is so powerful, so visceral, that it forces audience to react either like they're fleeing the building, or if they're suddenly convinced that this was the best thing they've ever seen and want all their friends to see it too. It's also quite non-naturalistic and incredibly physical. He tries to focus on movement rather than voice, and stripping down scripts to the most basic components in order to minimise and physicalise the performance. Berkoff is also a very avid follower of Artaud and his theory of total theatre, where every movement choreographed, every line learned, each lighting effect and every aspect of the performance has a total purpose in order to enhance the audience's experience. Berkoff's performances also look quite minimalistic. Each prop should have a use, stages are often left bare, and some plays feature very little language in themselves as to focus on just the physical movement and not the effects used to create a scene. All in all, this serves to detach the audience from the superficial aspects of the play and have the audience think about what is actually happening and being said rather than anything that might distract from that. Now that all that's out of the way, let's have a look at the characters. So, first off we have Gregor Samsa, and he is a character that changes very little over the course of the play. It's shown that both as a man and as an insect, he patiently accepts the hardships that are presented to him without any complaint, such as when he has to become the money earner because of his dad's failures to run a business. He also dislikes his job, he doesn't question his transformation, and he doesn't actively seek a cure, he just tries to get on with it. As the play goes on, Gregor's physicality soon becomes his psychology. But his humanity never entirely leaves him. He still feels his human emotion, and he still retains his memories of human life, and he panics when his possessions are moved by his mother and his sister. He is shown to always do what he thinks is best for his family, and he dies just as he lived, without any complaint. And following on from this, we have Gregor's sister, Greta Samuelson, and she's the only character to show pity for Gregor throughout most of the play. She acts as Gregor's primary caretaker and his only source of human constant contact. Furthermore, she acts as Gregor's strongest tie to his family and the rest of humanity, and has the largest character development within the play itself. At first she takes care of Gregor out of kindness and then becomes responsible to him out of duty. She also uses her role as caretaker to define her position in the family rather than out of the kindness that she showed before. And when getting an actual job, her commitment to Gregor diminishes, and finally she is the single character who decides to get rid of Gregor. Then we have Mr. Samsa, who appears as an exhausted, unkind and overbearing figure. He seems to be concerned primarily over money, and despite Gregor having been the one working to clear off Mr. Samsa's own debts and look after the family for him, he holds very little sympathy for Gregor after his transformation. In Mr. Samsa's two main scenes where he interacts with Gregor, he attacks him. He first beats him back to his room with his stick, which pierces him, and then throws the apple into his back, which permanently festers within him and damages him. Resembling Franz Kafka and his own father, he is very estranged to his son, and despite it being Mr. Samsa's own fault, Gregor is trapped within his father's failings and constantly working to get out. Next we have Mrs. Samsa. We first kind of get to know when she rushes to Gregor's defence when the chief clerk accuses him of laziness. She is also very initially shocked at Gregor's transformation. However, she does want to enter his room. However, when she does go in, it does prove too much for her, and first gives her rise between the conflict between her maternal impulses and sympathy in comparison to fear and repulsion at Gregor's new form. Greta and Mr. Samsa also appear to be seeking to protect her from the reality of Gregor's transformation, and when Mr. Samsa attacks Gregor with the apple, she pleads for Gregor's life. However, after all this, she does still show relief when Gregor dies. As well as this, we have the chief clerk, who is impatient, distrustful and overbearing. Gregor states that he has a very irritating habit of talking down to him, showing his aloofness, and he also is the representation of the attitudes and oppression of authority, which on top of this, we have the lodgers, who can be played as Berkoff suggests as either one or three different people. In the pitch that I have here, it is just one. They are quite fast-moving, acrobatic and energetic, and they are also showed as caricatures of in italics gentlemen who wear harlequin pigments to show their greed. They dominate very easily over the servile Samsa family, and they take it upon themselves to run the household. They make sure everything is ordered, nothing is superfluous, and everything's to their standards. They also very carefully inspect their food to eat pleasure and displeasure at Greg's violin playing at points, and at the sight of Gregor they give their notice on the spot and refuse to pay for the room. So now we have all that cleared up, what actually happens in the play? Well, the play opens with the characters introducing themselves by creating a shape of a beetle with their bodies, and following this short sequence, the scene continues with Gregor coming home from a seemingly quite normal day for the family. Gregor expresses that he feels ill, but the family assures him that he should not take the day off due to the fear of the chief clerk coming. Shortly after this, they all go and recite to bed. The family awake and notice that Gregor is not off work as usual, and aware that during the night Gregor has changed. They try to go and wake him up, but on the other side of the door there is Gregor, who's trying to take it in his new condition. He thinks it to be a dream and is struggling to get out the door and control any of his body. Very promptly, the chief clerk arrives. He demands to know why Greg has not shown up to work that day, and claiming that he's been falling behind at his job and is maybe trying to hide the funds that he has been entrusted to the day before. The family then try to defend him, and they all try and break into Gregor's room. Finally, Gregor manages to open the door using his mandibles, but wounds himself in the mouth by doing so, and when he comes out, the entire family is horrified. The chief clerk runs away screaming. Mr. Samson then forces Gregor back into his room and piercing with his cane in the process. The next scene is in the evening of the very same day, and the family are listening very eagerly to Gregor's movements. They discuss his condition and amongst themselves. Mr. and Mrs. Samson have a small argument, Mr. Samson saying that the son has left them, and Mrs. Samson claiming that he will return and that he needs them more than ever right now, and they have to be sensitive towards him. Gregor then has a vision of his normal life and his fond memories of milk, his favourite drink, before being brought back to the present and discovered that he is now disgusted by it. The following morning, Mrs. Samson and Greta present Gregor with whatever food they have left in the kitchen, and he has not been eating any normal food, so as Mrs. Samson tries his best to ignore them. Gregor then remarks how the wound on his mandible is healed and how he must be less sensitive and healing faster now. Mr. and Mrs. Samson once again argue and then agree that Gregor will no longer be fed in Mr. Samson's presence. Greta then decides that she will take sole responsibility for Gregor feeding, cleaning him, and reporting to Mr. and Mrs. Samson his progress. After this, Father then begins complaining about money, blaming Gregor for the indisposition for letting him suffer on his own account. Mrs. Samson then brings up how much. The family then have a vision of the Christmas previous, where Gregor announces that one day he will send Greta to study music at the conservatorium. As the vision ends, Gregor remarks that Greta wasn't able to go due to Mr. Samson, who took the money that was meant for Greta. There is an image of Mr. Samson wrestling with his son and the age will desire the father wishing to kill off his male offspring. Heading back into reality, Mr. Samson announces that he had invested the money that Greta had saved, and the investments have now grown, so they may not have to struggle anymore for money, and Greta decides to get a job. The next time that Greta comes into Gregor's room, Gregor attempts to speak to her, but only succeeds in frightening her. Gregor then decides that he will not attempt to speak to anybody again. The next day, Greta and Mrs. Samson get Mr. Samson smart and ready for his first day at work. They discuss Gregor becoming more reclusive and begin to crawl amongst the wall and ceiling. Gregor says that he enjoys this more than before as he has a lot more space. Greta and Mrs. Samson think that Gregor may like having a bit more room and attempt to take some of his possessions out of it. However, Gregor feels like he's being dehumanized and attacks him. Gregor then escapes his room, but before he can do anything more, Mrs. Samson comes back home and throws an apple at him, launching it to his back. Gregor then crawls back to his room without pain. A new scene opens where Greta and Mr. and Mrs. Samson are relaxing. It's probably a bit of time waiting. Greta and Mrs. Samson discuss removing the apple from Gregor's festering back before heading to sleep. The next day, the family attempt to remove the apple but can't bring themselves to do it. Mrs. Samson expresses her desire to move out the small house, but Mr. Samson remarks that they cannot because of that creature in there. Gregor retorts to himself that they are blaming him for their own helplessness. Gregor dreams of going back to work, and life becomes even more nightmarish, even more repetitive than it was before, and relives Mr. Samson throwing the apple back in his back. Mrs. Sampson sits outside Gregor's room, trying to reassure him and herself that she will look after him, even if nobody else does, and that he is going to get better soon. The family then bring in some lodgers for a bit of extra money, who prove to be very demanding and take control of the house of the Serval family, who try and hide Gregor from them. Upon their arrival, Greg is quite hostile towards the lodgers. They seem to have replaced him as the money earners and focus of the family's attention. He sees the family at this point who are ignoring him, treating him as if he is an animal. Gregor then bursts into the room, and the lodgers are very horrified at the sight of him. Immediately they hand in their notices and leave, refusing to pay a single penny to the family. At this point it is all proven too much for Greta, and she's finally had enough, telling the family that they must get rid of it. Mr. Sampson surprisingly does his best to try and speak up for Gregor, but Greta shoots him down, saying that they need to get rid of the idea that he is Gregor. At this point, Gregor breaks back into his room, returning distraught. Gregor says that he now knows that he is a growing agony and a burden to his family, and knows that the best thing for him now then to do is to disappear. Mrs. Sampson then kind of relents, counting how, as he returned to his room, she saw Gregor's eyes and saw him full of agony, and he looked at her in such a way as only a child would look at his mother, as if to say no more pain. She asks him to bear no hatred and forgive him to be free, and at this, Gregor dies. When they find him, the family are very thankful for Gregor's death. They are finally able to move on with their lives and to be happy once more. They decide to take the next day off to buy a new and smaller house, and they also remark how Greta has blossomed into adulthood and how they must find a good husband for her. The play fades as they close on the line. The crocuses will just be coming out, and a final spotlight lingers onto Gregor's body, and the play ends. Well, what a wonderfully happy ending. That was Stephen Berkoff's The Metamorphosis. I have been Elias Arcade. Remember to like, comment, favourite and subscribe. If there's any players that you want me to try and quickly do in the 15 minutes or less series, let me know. As always, thank you very much for watching. Bye bye!